What's up guys, it's Euphoria here. Today we're going to be looking at the effects section inside Massive. Now quickly before we start, I just want to say, if you like this video, please hit like. It really helps me out so much. And if you haven't subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe. Okay, so master effects section in Massive. Okay, so pretty much what you have, you've got two effect slots and one dedicated EQ. Okay. These control knobs are dependent on whatever effect you have selected. We're going to go through each effect and see how they affect the sound as well as each control parameter. And as you can see here, you've got some effects that are available in mono, and where it doesn't say mono, that's assumed to just be stereo. Okay, so you also have two modulation slots for each knob. Okay, so with that in mind, let's have a look and see at each different effect. Okay, so let's look at reverb. Now, reverb, I'm sure everybody knows what a reverb is. It's that kind of spacious effect that is apparent in virtually every song ever made, I'm sure. And each effect is going to have a dry and wet knob. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go through the dry wet knob once, and then it's going to be the same for each effect. Okay, so pretty much a dry wet knob is basically how much effect the effect is going to have on the unaltered sound. So when it's all the way to the left, the signal is going to be considered dry, and if I was to play a note now, if I switch this effect off and on, you're not going to hear any difference. Okay, so that signal is considered dry. If I turn it up completely to wet, what that's going to do is you're only going to hear the reverb and you're not going to hear any of the dry sound. So pretty much, when it's in the middle, you're going to get 50% dry and 50% wet. Okay, and if I just move the knob from the dry all the way to the wet, you're going to hear an unaltered sound turn into a complete reverb sound. Okay, so that's pretty much what a dry and wet knob does. Okay, so your reverb, you've got your size, density, and color knobs in addition to your dry wet knob, and the size is going to be the length of reverberation. So when it's all the way to the left, very low, very short reverb. In other words, the tail is going to die down quickly, and when it's all the way to the right, the tail is going to take a long time to die down. Now this kind of thing can be enhanced by using more wet than dry. So let's say if it's here, if you put your dry wet knob here with your sides at full, it's going to be very soft in the background. But if it's louder, okay, so there you have it. Your density knob is the reverb diffusion, which this means is a lower density, there's going to be more echoes which are going to create your reverb. So let's have a look at that. So when it's all the way full, it's almost like a smooth kind of sound, and when it's lower, you can actually hear some of the echoes. Okay, and then your color knob is basically a low pass filter, and this is pretty much the cutoff. So when it's all the way to the right, the filter is completely open, and as you pull it down, it's going to cut the high frequencies. And just one thing to note with this, say, filter, is that it's not actually affecting the dry signal. It's only really affecting the reverb, which is your wet signal. Okay, so that's reverb. So the next one is small reverb, and the parameters here are exactly the same as above. Even the algorithm uses the same. The only difference is these parameters are mapped to a smaller range, so it's easier to sort of fine tune it, but using a smaller reverb instead of like a big reverb is gonna be easier to create a wider sound almost immediately without having this long reverb tail. So we're not going to look at each parameter because they all do the exact same thing. But we can quickly do a sort of demonstration. So I'm going to put dry wet at 50, SARS all the way full. The density is going to be up for a nice smooth sound, and we'll leave it the color full for complete brightness. Okay, so with all of these completely full and the dry wet in the middle, your reverb's going to sound like this. Now if we go to the other reverb and leave the parameters in the exact same place and press a note, you can hear that it takes much longer to die down. Right, so next we have your flanger, which is going to be your classic flanger sound. Now you'll notice there's 4 different types. You've got your flanger positive, and then you've got that in mono, and you have flanger negative, and then you have that in mono. Now the difference between positive and negative is it's kind of hard to explain, but it's pretty much just a phase inverted signal. So let's say if you think of a sine wave that goes up and down, it's pretty much just the inverted signal from that. So it's going to go down and up, but it's only affecting the flanger part of the signal. So so the best thing is just play around with that, and you'll learn quickly what it means. And also just keep an eye on here on this plugin that's called JScope, for everyone who is wondering. It's going to show you it's going to give you an idea of the difference. Okay, so your flanger's obviously got your dry wet knob as well, and then it's got rate, feedback, and depth. So your rate is going to be the speed, the speed of the delay time change. And that sounds a bit confusing, but pretty much that sounds like this. Okay, your feedback is going to be the amount of delayed signal that's routed back into the input. And that is going to sound like this. Okay, and then your depth is going to be the amount of delay time variation, which sounds like this. So using these 3 knobs creatively together, you can create quite extraordinary sounds with the flanger. And then the negative, so let's just compare it quickly. So I don't know if you can tell the difference, but it's almost like the opposite. And why you would use negative and positive, besides the fact that it's going to sound different, because the actual the change in the flange sound is going to interfere with the original dry sound, and that's going to create like different types of effects. But also, if you're running into sort of like phase issues and that kind of thing, you can just flick over to negative and see if that's going to help your sound. Okay, next we have the chorus effect, which also has mono, if that's what you need, if you don't want any stereo. And pretty much what a chorus is it almost sounds like the dry signal was created by a choir, obviously once you add the effect to it. And how it does this is a slight pitch shift on each voice, and also a slight delay on each voice that's coming into the effect. And so it allows to create quite a sort of fat sound. And the parameters you have are rate, offset, and depth. And your rate is going to affect the modulation speed. Okay. Your offset is going to be the main delay time. So you can almost hear it beginning. After I press a note, you're going to hear it begin like slightly after I press a note. Whereas here it's going to be sort of smooth, and it's all going to start at the same time. And then your depth is going to be the amount of data, the amount of delay time modulation, and that the difference sounds like this. There you have it. That is chorus. Okay, so next we have a phaser, and the phaser is going to create sort of a classic phasing sound, and it's going to sound like the signal is phasing. Actually, if you move it all the way wet, it's going to be a phasing signal, and this mixed in with the dry is going to give an interesting interference pattern. And how this happens is that it uses several like all-pass filters, and which change the phase of the original signal. And your parameters are going to be rate, depth, and feedback. Your rate is going to control the speed of the all-pass frequency modulation. So that's going to be how quick the cutoff moves up and down because remember, it's being created by all-pass filters. So with rate turned down, it's going to sound like this. Okay, there you go. Then feedback is going to be the intensity of it. So when it's all the way down, it's not going to be affecting the sound as much. Okay, and then depth is going to be the amount of modulation. So let's have a look at that. Okay. Okay, so that's going to be your phaser. And next, we're going to have a look at some delay. Now, in the earlier version of Massive, this was actually called small delay. And it was intended as sort of the same as like your small reverb. So, less of an effect. And it's pretty much your classic echo sound. It's also obviously got a dry wet knob. And it's got 3 parameters, damp, and then time left and time right. Your damp is pretty much a low pass filter. So this is the cutoff of that low pass filter. So when it's up, it's going to be a sort of a brighter delay, and as I turn it down, it's going to become more dull. But that's also only on the actual echoed sound, not on the original signal. So let's have a look at that. Okay, and then your other 2 knobs are time left and time right. Now, bearing in mind, with these turned all the way up, you wouldn't be able to use this as like your classic kind of delay, because there's not enough. It only delays once, so there's only one feedback, and it's really short. So the idea of this is to use this damp and like slightly offsetting these, and you're going to create like a bigger kind of sound. See, like that sounds much wider than that. Let's even pull this down. So that's the idea for that. And then you've got delay synced. So your delay synced is sort of your more classic kind of delay sound. And your damp is going to do the exact same thing. Your time left and time right is going to do the same thing, except now it's tempo synced. So 1/4 is going to give you your 4 to the floor kind of sound, depending on whatever tempo you have. And you can offset these slightly. And then this got another knob, which is a feedback knob, and that's going to control how long it echoes for. So that's going to be sort of 1. there you have it. So the higher your feedback, the longer the sound's going to take to die out. Okay, so you can have some fun with that, and that's going to be your delay. Right, next we have Dubstep's favorite tool, Dimension Expander. And this only has one knob that's going to do anything, and that's going to be called SARS. Now this SARS is kind of the same as your reverb SARS, and that's going to really control the time of the delay, because the Dimension Expander sound, it is created by a combination of delay and chorus, and the purpose of it is to make your sound wider. And so the SARS knob is pretty much it's called SARS because when it's to the left, your sound is going to be not as wide as when it's full, but it's actually controlling the amount of delay between the delay and chorus. Now, for those of you who want to use the sound on other sounds coming from different synths, you can download from Steve Duda's website, which is oh crap, I can't remember the name of his label, but I'll put a link in the description anyway. He's got it, and you add it as an effect into your mixer, as you would add reverb or anything coming from any other sound. It's really cool. His label is called Ep3 Records. I'll put a link in the description. And then so now we've got our tubes, and for those of you who don't know what a tube is used to be able to get these things called tube amps, and they used to create sort of like warm and dirtier sounds. It almost sounds like a distortion, and so these three options emulate that tube amp. And your first one is a classic tube, which is gonna, as you turn up the drive, it's just gonna give you like a distorted kind of sound. But it's subtle, it's not like super distortion, otherwise you could just use distortion. And then you've got your tele tube, which is softer than your classic tube. So the so it's going to sound less as the one we're on now. So let's look at that one more time. And then finally we have a Brauner tube, which is sort of brighter than your original classic tube. And mixing this in with the dry and wet lets you create quite a nice sound. And then finally we have our EQ. Now the EQ is got 4 parameters: your low shelf, high shelf, and then a boost in frequency. So what does this do? Well, when it's in 50%, that's gonna be, the sound is sort of like unaltered. So as you pull it down, it's going to reduce the amount, and as you push it up, it's going to increase the amount. So let's have a look and see. So as I pull this down, you're going to see the low end is going to reduce, and as I push it up, it's going to increase. Keep an eye up here on the EQ. Okay, and then the same is going to happen, but this time for the high end. Okay, and then you've got boost and frequency. So now let's say boost is down and I move frequency up and down. What it's going to do is so pretty much this is going to choose what frequency is affected, and then you're going to be able to boost it or cut it. So let's have a look at that again. And that pretty much is your effects section of Massive. Now here's just one thing to keep in mind when using your effects, and that's if we go to this routing tab over here, which we're going to look at more in depth in another episode. These effects come way at the end of the signal path. So if you know how insert effects and all that kind of thing work, you'll notice that your effects at the end is right before your master. There's really nothing after that, so these effects are going to be right at the end of the chain, which is kind of important to remember. And yeah, so using these in conjunction with each other, you can create some really cool things. So that's been the effects section of Massive. Next episode, we're looking at the voicing tab and the oscillation tab. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that video. If you did, hitting like would be much appreciated, as well as subscribing. Yeah, it really helps me out a lot and allows me to keep on making these kinds of videos. So yeah, so hopefully I'll see you next time. This has been Euphoria. Keep well, guys.